the Ming defeat the Mongols, force them out, and move the capital. They established their capital in Nanjing, and they moved that capital in 1420 to Beijing, in part in order to be closer to this dangerous border, fearing the return of the Mongols. They are the ones who build the Great Wall that we now know today as a Mongol defense mechanism. And they set up Beijing, and it survives remarkably intact. Even though there's this dynastic change and some palaces are burned in 1644 when the Qing take over, it's easily rebuilt. It becomes the center of imperial legitimacy and the symbol of imperial rule. Yuan Shikai, in the first president of the Republic of China, puts his offices right outside of the imperial city.
And there's a big conflict between Yuan and Sun Yat-sen over Beijing versus Nanjing, right?
That's right. He thinks that Nanjing is a place for Chinese,
right,
and Beijing is a place where these foreign Mongols and Manchus had made their capital. He's of course, he's from Guangzhou, so he would probably even prefer it further south.
Right.
But no, he preferred Nanjing. The nationalists, of course, when they come to power and they unify the country in 1927, they reestablish the capital in Nanjing, and Beijing is renamed to Beiping, not Northern Capital, but Northern Peace, as in war and peace, Northern Peace. And Nanjing is then to be built as the greatest city in China.
Right. It's interesting that Beiping gets its old name back and reverts to being the capital under communist leadership.
They reestablish themselves as a northern Chinese regime. They are there. They get assistance from the Soviet Union. It's another reason to think of why Beijing is more useful than Nanjing. Large numbers of Japanese puppet troops defect to them in the Civil War. So they inherit a large number of regional Chinese armies that are northern Chinese armies. And so by the time that they capture Beiping in 1948, they really are a North Chinese movement.
And hence the transition is natural.
And even though Mao Zedong himself is from Hunan, Deng Xiaoping from Sichuan, and so on, in the large movement is, and they set themselves up in the imperial gardens of Zhongnanhai, where the government continues to reside to this day.
And they set about the process of recasting the city in their image rather than in the emperor's image. Right?
Exactly. Preserving the imperial city, not well for most of this period, but nevertheless preserving it well enough, and then trying to build a modern Beijing around it. They had a choice in the 1950s. The great architect and city planner Liang Shicheng, who is a close friend of the founder of Chinese studies here at Harvard, John Fairbank, John and Wilma Fairbank, he proposed to build a new Beijing separate. You know, some cities have done this, like Belgrade, absolutely, and others have built.
St. Petersburg, right?
St. Petersburg, you build a new city outside. And he said that this was the way to preserve the great, architecture and power, symbolic power of Beijing and its history, while having a modern socialist Beijing be next door to it. And Mao Zedong said no, and began this. The walls, they allowed them to be kind of self-destructive. People taking things to build houses, since the state had no resources to build much in the way of houses. But basically then they demolished them all, and you just see a few, it's so sad today because you see a few lonely towers here and there along what we now call the Second Ring Road, which is where the walls originally were. And it's tough to see them because they're hidden by high rises and smog.
Beijing also has this feeling of vast boulevards with large towers, some of which are new, some of which are from the full-fledged Mao era. In part because Beijing still feels much more like an imperial city and much less like a commercial city.
But not as much as an imperial city as it could have been preserved. One of the nice things about Shanghai is that almost nothing was built for so long until Shanghai began to get rich, and so it could afford to renovate some older housing in French Concession and elsewhere in particular. Beijing, the traditional housing of Beijing, the hutongs, were entirely dilapidated and not well maintained by anyone. Certainly not by the state. Of course, all of them state-owned, as all land would become. So the kind of you think of Beijing historically as a walled city with the great forbidden city at the heart of it, this kind of red and gold forbidden city, and a series of North China villages all around it in these low gray, what the Mongols called hutongs, because it was the Mongols who made it the capital that we now know today, then the Ming and then the Qing. What Mao Zedong did, tragically, was to tear down the great defining city walls, the greatest city walls in the world, that had architecturally defined and separated Beijing from the rest of China and from the rest of East Asia as the kind of cultural nexus of power in East Asia. Tear down these walls because that's what modern governments did, and that's what the Russians recommended, and for boulevards in a day in which they had no cars.
Right.
And Beijing has never really recovered from this. It's been, and maybe this is true, you will know this better than me, it's my experience that capital cities are among often the worst managed cities. Washington, D.C. Comes to mind, not in terms of design, but in terms of effective governance. So Beijing, compared to Shanghai, has had poor planning, much higher levels of corruption over time. If you look at public transportation in Beijing, there was only one subway line for a very, very long time. It went into a circle around the Forbidden City. Basically, it was an air raid shelter for fear of Soviet attack, but it was useless in terms of public transportation. And today, they've built ring road upon ring road upon ring road, and you can spend all your time, as I do, on ring roads going nowhere, and traffic that is horrific, and high levels of pollution. It's a city that I think defies optimism in terms of its capacity, in some ways, to survive. It's a city without water, increasingly. It is a place, of course, that I would not be surprised in 2035 that the capital of China is somewhere else.